Emily had never been the kind of woman who turned heads. At 40, she lived a quiet life in her small town, working at the library, wearing neat clothes, and keeping her world simple. Everyone in her family saw her as the reliable one, the dependable aunt who never surprised anyone. But on a warm summer evening, she felt something stirring inside her, a longing for change. Earlier that week, she had bought a denim miniskirt. It hung untouched in her closet, almost mocking her with the boldness she rarely allowed herself. That night, she finally slipped it on, pairing it with a white blouse and light sandals. As she looked at herself in the mirror, she laughed nervously. It wasn't outrageous, but it showed more of her than she was used to. For once, she wasn't dressing to play the safe role. She was dressing to feel alive again. She stepped onto the porch just as the sun dipped low, painting the sky in pink and gold. She expected to sit alone for a while, waiting for her nephew Daniel to arrive later to help with some repairs. But as luck would have it, a car pulled into her driveway sooner than she thought. Daniel stepped out, tall and broad-shouldered, with the restless confidence of youth. At 22, he was no longer the boy who once chased fireflies in her backyard, he was a man. When his eyes met hers, something shifted. His gaze widened slightly before softening, as if he were seeing her for the very first time. Emily felt her face grow hot. She tugged at her blouse, suddenly wishing she had stayed in her old jeans. "Hi, Aunt Emily," Daniel said, his voice steady, though his eyes lingered on her longer than usual. She forced a smile. "You're early. Finished work quicker than expected," he replied, carrying his toolbox toward the house. But Emily could sense it. He was still processing the sight of her in that skirt, and the realization left a spark flickering in her chest. Inside, she busied herself pouring iced tea while Daniel settled at the table. They ate a simple dinner together, talking about school, work, and the summer heat. On the surface, everything felt normal, but beneath it, Emily couldn't ignore the way his gaze kept finding her. He wasn't looking at her as the aunt who bought him Christmas sweaters. He was looking at her as a woman. When their hands brushed as she passed him a glass of tea, she froze. It was only a small touch, but her heart raced. Daniel gave her a soft smile and said quietly, "You look happy tonight." The words startled her. Happy. She hadn't thought about happiness in years. Most of her days felt routine, safe, predictable. She gave a small laugh, brushing it off. "It must be the weather," she said. But Daniel's eyes lingered on her, as if he knew she was hiding behind the answer. Later, when she stepped onto the porch alone, the cool air wrapped around her like a question she couldn't escape. She pressed a hand to her chest, replaying that moment, the look in his eyes, the touch of his hand, the words that struck deeper than they should have. It was nothing, she told herself. Just a glance, just a comment, and yet, something inside her had shifted forever. For the first time in years, Emily felt seen in a way that went beyond her role as the dependable aunt. She wasn't just the safe one anymore. She was a woman, standing in the soft evening light, wearing a skirt that reminded her she was still alive. What she didn't realize then was that this small moment would mark the beginning of a quiet but powerful shift inside her. The evening went on as though nothing unusual had happened. Emily filled the silence with talk of her favorite books, the new neighbors who had just moved in, even the tomatoes ripening in her garden. But every time she looked across the table, Daniel's eyes were on her. His gaze carried a mix of curiosity, warmth, and something she couldn't quite name. It unsettled her, yet at the same time, it stirred something deep within. Daniel was no longer the boy who begged her for pancakes on Saturday mornings. His shoulders had broadened, his voice carried the weight of manhood, and there was a quiet confidence about him that caught her off guard. He had grown into someone with plans, ambition, and a steady presence, and she wondered how she had missed the exact moment the boy she knew had become a man. After dinner, Emily brought out her special china cups, the ones she usually reserved for guests, and placed them on the coffee table. Daniel settled into the couch as she poured the tea, and the quiet between them grew heavier, not uncomfortable, but charged, as though the air itself had changed. "Thank you," Daniel said softly as he accepted the cup. Then, after a pause, he added, "You seem different tonight." Emily gave a light laugh, trying to dismiss the weight of his words. "Different how?" she asked. Daniel tilted his head, studying her with a seriousness that made her heart race. "Not in a bad way," he said slowly. "Just, more yourself. I've never seen you like this before." The words struck her deeper than she expected. For so long, she had been the reliable one, the predictable one, living inside a role her family expected of her. Now, for the first time, someone saw beyond that mask, and it left her shaken in ways she couldn't ignore. But now, here was Daniel, someone from her own family, telling her he saw something different in her. Emily sipped her tea slowly, eyes fixed on the cup as if it could hide the heat rising inside her. "Maybe you're just imagining it," she said softly. "I'm still the same." "Maybe," Daniel replied, though his tone carried a quiet certainty that told her he didn't believe it. The silence that followed wasn't awkward, but it carried weight. Emily felt his eyes on her, and against her will, her mind replayed the earlier moment when his hand had brushed against hers. She shook the thought away quickly. It was just a fleeting touch. Nothing more. Determined to steer the conversation into safer territory, she asked about his classes. Daniel talked about long nights of studying, the stress of exams, and the difficult balance between his job and schoolwork. But even in that ordinary conversation, Emily noticed something different. He wasn't speaking to her as a boy reporting his life to an older relative. He spoke as though they were equals, as if her thoughts and opinions mattered in a way that both startled and moved her. As the minutes slipped by, Emily found herself opening up in ways she hadn't expected. She confessed how lonely the house felt at times, how she wished she had taken more risks when she was younger, and how her life had slowly fallen into a pattern of routine. She hadn't planned on saying any of it, yet Daniel simply listened. His attention was steady, his gaze warm, and not once did he interrupt. At one point, his words cut straight into her heart. "You deserve more, Aunt Emily. You always put everyone else first, but you forget about yourself." The weight of his honesty left her shaken. No one had ever said that to her, not so plainly, not so sincerely. She tried to smile, but her throat felt tight. "Life doesn't always work out the way we plan," she whispered. Daniel leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees. "Maybe not, but that doesn't mean you should stop living." Emily froze, her teacup trembling faintly in her hand. She wanted to dismiss his words, to brush them off with the same polite smile she gave everyone else. But she couldn't. His voice stayed with her, pressing against the walls she had built over the years. For the first time, she realized how rarely anyone truly saw her, not as the dependable aunt, but as a woman with dreams, with regrets, and with a heart that longed to be more than safe. By midnight, she forced herself into bed, but sleep refused to come. She tossed and turned, the memory looping endlessly in her mind. By morning, she hid herself in jeans and a loose sweater, but the woman staring back from the mirror felt unfamiliar. There was a spark in her eyes now, something restless, something questioning. Her chores offered no escape. The whistle of the kettle, the clink of a teacup, even the faint trace of Daniel's cologne in the hallway, all of it pulled her back to the night before. Folding laundry, she caught herself imagining laughter again, feeling admired, being chosen. The thought filled her with shame as quickly as it filled her with warmth. Daniel was her nephew. He was young, with an entire life ahead of him. She had no right to let her mind wander. And yet, she couldn't ignore the way her chest had stirred when he told her she deserved more. For the first time in years, Emily didn't feel invisible. She felt noticed, and though she tried to bury that realization, something deep inside whispered that what had started on the porch was not the end, it was the beginning. She stood at the window as the sun climbed higher, telling herself it was just another day, just another task. Daniel would be back soon to help with the garden fence. Still, a quiet ache lingered in her chest, a wondering if their next encounter would feel the same, or if everything had already changed. Thoughts of Daniel clung to Emily like shadows she couldn't shake. She told herself to ignore them, to pretend life was the same, but her heart betrayed her. She couldn't erase the memory of how he had looked at her, the way his words had slipped past every wall she had built around herself. Standing before her closet, she hesitated. The skirt she had worn yesterday had stirred feelings she hadn't felt in years. She couldn't bring herself to wear it again. Instead, she reached for her safest choices: blue jeans, a loose sweater, and worn sneakers. Practical, simple, comfortable. The version of herself she was supposed to be. By late morning, Daniel appeared, toolbox in hand, ready to fix the leaning garden fence. Emily spotted him through the window and instinctively brushed her hair back, trying to look casual, not like a woman who had spent half the night replaying his voice in her mind. When she opened the door, Daniel greeted her with his easy smile. "Morning, Aunt Emily," he said warmly. "Morning," she replied, steadying her tone. "Thank you for coming." They stepped into the backyard, where the grass still shimmered with dew. Daniel set his toolbox down, shrugged off his jacket, and rolled his sleeves up his forearms. In the clear light of day, he looked different, more grounded, more certain of himself. Emily forced herself to look away, though her heart was already paying attention. It was impossible for Emily to ignore how different Daniel seemed now compared to the boy she used to know. As they worked side by side, she passed him nails and steadied the wooden planks while he hammered them into place. Their conversation drifted through safe topics: his classes, the new dog down the street, the weather. The words were ordinary, yet beneath them was a quiet tension Emily couldn't quite name. She avoided looking at him too closely, afraid her eyes might reveal too much. When a nail slipped to the ground, she bent to pick it up. Daniel chuckled softly, the sound catching her off guard. She looked up quickly, flustered. "What?" she asked. He shook his head, smiling. "Nothing. Just, you didn't have to change for me." Emily froze, the nail still resting in her palm. "What do you mean?" she whispered. Daniel leaned against the fence post, his voice steady but gentle. "Yesterday, you looked so free. Today, you're back to hiding behind those sweaters." Turning away, Emily busied her hands with the tools, her voice quiet. "It's just more comfortable for work," she said. "Maybe," Daniel replied, his tone soft, never mocking. "But you didn't look uncomfortable yesterday." His words struck harder than Emily expected. She kept her back to him, pretending to concentrate on the fence, though her heart was racing, not just because of what he said, but because of how deeply she wanted to believe him. For the rest of the morning, she avoided his eyes. They worked mostly in silence, the quiet broken only by the steady rhythm of hammering and the soft scrape of wood. Yet even without words, she felt him, close, steady, always within reach. Each time his hand brushed hers or he passed her a tool, it left a ripple inside her that she couldn't ignore. When the last board was finally in place, Daniel wiped his forehead and leaned casually against the fence, pride in his expression. Emily stood a few steps away, arms crossed, struggling to find the right words. He looked at her then, with that calm, knowing gaze, the same one from the night before that unsettled her because it seemed to see too much. "You don't have to pretend around me," he said softly. The words caught her off guard. She blinked, unsure. "Pretend what? That you're only the serious aunt," he replied with quiet certainty. "I know you're more than that." Her throat tightened. She wanted to laugh it off, make light of it, but the weight of his sincerity made it impossible. His words reached straight into the truth she had tried so hard to bury. Emily opened her mouth, then closed it again, unable to respond. Daniel didn't push her. He simply smiled, gathering his tools as if he hadn't just unraveled her carefully built disguise with a single sentence. He carried the box back toward the house, leaving Emily standing by the fence, her heart pounding. She had thought the jeans and sweater would protect her, that retreating into her safe version of self would keep things simple. But it hadn't. But Daniel had seen through her anyway. He had uncovered the part of her she had spent years trying to hide, and no matter how much she wanted to dismiss it, she couldn't deny the truth. Something had shifted between them, something that could never fully be taken back. By late afternoon, the backyard was quiet, the hum of cicadas thick in the heat. The fence stood straight, the tools were neatly put away, yet Daniel lingered as if he wasn't ready to leave. Emily returned with 2 tall glasses of lemonade, her fingers trembling slightly as she passed one to him. They sat in the shade of the oak tree, the silence between them heavier than the summer air. Daniel took a slow sip, his gaze steady, almost searching. "You know," he said carefully, "you've always been the strongest person in our family." Emily let out a small, uncertain laugh. "Strong? I don't know about that. I've only done what needed to be done." Daniel shook his head. "No, it's more than that. You've carried everyone. You were there when Grandpa got sick. You stepped in when Mom couldn't manage. You even helped me when I was falling behind in school. You never complained. You never let anyone see you tired." His words pressed against her heart, soft but powerful. She lowered her eyes to the glass in her hands, unable to meet his steady gaze. "That's what family does," she whispered, though even as she said it, she felt her walls weakening. Daniel leaned back against the tree trunk, his eyes steady on her. "Maybe, but family doesn't always notice the cost," he said softly. "Yesterday, when I saw you on the porch, it was like you finally let yourself breathe. Like, for once, you weren't carrying the whole world on your shoulders." Emily froze. His tone was calm, but the weight of his words sank deep inside her. Her chest tightened as tears stung her eyes before she could stop them. "Daniel, don't," she whispered, her throat aching. "Don't say things like," and in that moment, she knew with chilling certainty, nothing would ever be the same again. 2 days later, Daniel returned, not with his toolbox this time, but with something else on his mind. He leaned against the porch rail, casual but intentional, and asked, "Do you want to go for a walk by the lake?" Emily froze. Her instinct was to decline, to shield herself with the usual excuses, laundry waiting, dinner to cook, errands to finish. But when she opened her mouth, the word that slipped out surprised even her. Yes, the lake wasn't far, just a short walk past the tall trees at the edge of her street. That afternoon the water glimmered under the sun, its surface touched by ripples of breeze. On weekends it buzzed with families and noise, but today it was hushed, almost secret, as though the place itself had been waiting for them. They followed the shaded path that curved around the water, their steps in rhythm though neither spoke at first. Emily's pulse quickened with every brush of closeness, the silence carrying more weight than words could. She tried to keep her eyes on the dirt trail ahead, but her thoughts slipped back to the garden, to the way his voice had softened when he said, "I see you." Daniel broke the quiet. "I used to come here a lot when I was a teenager," he said. "Whenever things got too loud at home or at school, I'd sit by the water until it felt quiet again." Emily's lips curved into a faint smile. There was something disarming in his honesty, the way he spoke without expecting her to fill the space with answers. "I didn't know that," Emily murmured. Daniel's gaze lingered on her. "There's a lot you don't know," he said gently. "Just like there's a lot about you I never noticed before." Her pulse raced at his words, her breath unsteady no matter how hard she tried to control it. "Daniel," she whispered, "you're making this harder for me." He stopped, his expression calm but serious. "I don't mean to make it hard. I just don't want to pretend. Not with you." The honesty in his voice struck deeper than anything she had heard in years. Emily turned toward the water, watching sunlight ripple across the lake's surface. For so long, she had craved to be seen, to be cherished, but never in a way that threatened everything she thought she knew about herself. Still, the certainty in his tone stirred something she couldn't push away. They resumed their walk, slower now, as if each step carried the weight of unspoken truths. When his hand brushed against hers, it felt like lightning passing through her. Neither of them pulled away. For a heartbeat, their hands lingered in the fragile space between closeness and restraint. Then Daniel's fingers brushed hers again, intentional this time. Emily's breath caught, but she didn't retreat. She allowed the distance to collapse, her hand warm beside his. The silence that followed was no longer empty. It was alive, the gentle lap of water against the shore, the songs of hidden birds in the trees, and the steady rhythm of their footsteps marking a moment that neither of them could ever take back. Finally, Daniel broke the silence, his voice low and deliberate. "Do you ever think about what you've given up?" Emily's throat tightened. "Every day," she admitted softly. "But I've learned to live with it." "You shouldn't have to just live with it," he said, his tone steady and firm. "You deserve more." Her eyes burned as tears threatened to fall, but she forced them back. She wanted to argue, to remind him of the invisible lines that couldn't be crossed, the rules that kept her safe. Yet beneath all her defenses, a fragile hope stirred, one that whispered maybe he was right. Maybe there was still time for her, still room in her life for her heart to wake up again. They reached a small wooden bench by the water and sat in silence. Emily clasped her hands tightly in her lap, her eyes fixed on the rippling surface of the lake. Daniel leaned forward, his elbows resting on his knees, quiet for what felt like forever. When he finally spoke, it was barely more than a whisper. "You don't have to answer me. But being with you like this, it feels right." Emily's chest ached as her heart thudded against her ribs. She had no words. Every part of her was torn between fear and longing, between reason and the dangerous pull of feeling. Slowly, she turned her face toward him. For a brief, breathtaking moment, their eyes locked. His gaze was steady, honest, filled with something she hadn't seen in years, something that made her feel alive again. Neither of them spoke on the way back, yet everything that needed to be said lingered in the silence between them. By the time they reached her house, Emily's mind was tangled with questions, her heart heavy with confusion, but also alive in a way she hadn't felt in years. The evening sky had turned gold, casting the world in a bittersweet glow. At the porch steps, Daniel paused. His hand rested on the rail as he looked at her, not with demand, but with a quiet promise in his eyes. Emily tried to speak, but no words came. Instead, she gave a small nod, and somehow, he seemed to understand. That night, lying in bed, she couldn't shake the memory of his touch, the way his hand had brushed hers, light and deliberate, the way his voice had carried such certainty. She told herself it was only a walk. Just two people sharing an afternoon by the lake. But deep in her heart, she knew the truth. Something deeper had taken root, and there was no turning back. Sleep never came easily. The silence of the house was deafening, and every detail of that walk replayed in her mind. The shimmer of sunlight on the water, the sound of their footsteps in sync, the fleeting touch of his fingers against hers that felt like a question he hadn't dared to ask. She pressed her palms against her face, whispering into the dark, "What am I doing?" Her heart ached in two directions at once. One side held fear, the voice that reminded her of rules she had lived by all her life. She was his aunt, his family. People would never understand. The other side throbbed with longing, the undeniable truth that Daniel had awakened something in her that she thought had been lost forever. Rolling onto her back, she stared at the ceiling. For years, her life had been safe, predictable, wrapped in routine. Work, family dinners, holidays that looked the same year after year. Evenings spent with tea and books, comforting but empty. Now, everything felt different. She looked away quickly, her pulse racing. "Daniel, we can't," she tried to say, but her voice cracked before the words could fully escape. He didn't push. He didn't argue. He simply stayed beside her, close enough that she could feel his warmth, silent but present. The walk back was quieter than before, heavy with everything left unsaid. Emily had built her life around being the dependable one, the aunt, the caretaker, the steady hand everyone leaned on. But when Daniel looked at her differently, he saw more than the role she played. He saw the woman she had buried beneath years of responsibility and silence. Their time together, from fixing the fence to walking by the lake, uncovered truths Emily had long denied. Daniel's quiet words and gentle presence made her feel seen in a way no one else ever had. His honesty broke down the walls she had carefully built, and with every glance, every unspoken moment, something shifted inside her. By the end, Emily could no longer hide from the truth. Her heart had awakened. What began as simple conversations turned into something deeper, something that blurred the lines between duty and desire. She knew the risks, the rules, the judgment that would follow, yet Daniel's presence made her question whether living in silence was worth the cost. This was no longer just about family roles or expectations. It was about a woman rediscovering her own heart after years of being invisible. And though she didn't yet know where this path would lead, one thing was certain: her life would never be the same again. Disclaimer: this story is a dramatized narrative created for entertainment and reflection. Any resemblance to real persons, events, or relationships is purely coincidental. The themes explore human emotions and choices, not moral guidance. Thank you for staying with us until the very end of this story. Every view, every comment, and every share helps us keep bringing you powerful tales of love, betrayal, and hidden emotions. If this story moved you, don't just scroll away, hit the subscribe button, tap the notification bell, and join our growing community. That way, you'll never miss the next emotional journey we release, each one crafted to keep you hooked, reflecting, and coming back for more. Stay connected, stay curious, and let's uncover the stories no one else dares to tell.